Live people ignore the strange and unusual.
For 20 years, the world has viewed the 2001 Saks Fifth Avenue incident as the ultimate act of celebrity entitlement. The narrative was simple: a bored, wealthy icon stealing what she could easily afford. But this diagnosis is a comfortable lie. The evidence doesn't reveal a criminal heist. It exposes a woman in a state of profound disassociation. Winona Ryder wasn't stealing for greed. She was the canary in the coal mine for a culture obsessed with consuming authentic pain, finally collapsing under the weight of her own empathy. To decode this breakdown, we must first locate the anomaly in the architecture of her stardom.
Yeah, well, I guess I picked the wrong time to be a human being.
Most Hollywood stars are manufactured in the pristine, fluorescent-lit casting rooms of Los Angeles. Winona Ryder was forged in a very different kind of incubator. To find the zero point of her psyche, we must travel back to a farmhouse in rural Minnesota, devoid of electricity but overflowing with radical literature. Winona was not born into a vacuum. She was the product of a specific, high-stakes intellectual experiment. Her father, Michael Horowitz, was an archivist for the Fitzhugh Ludlow Memorial Library, the world's largest collection of literature on psychoactive drugs. This was not a standard suburban upbringing. It was the epicenter of the American counterculture. Her environment was populated by the architects of the 1960s revolution. The beat poet Allen Ginsberg was a family friend. Her godfather was none other than Timothy Leary, the Harvard psychologist who famously urged a generation to turn on, tune in, drop out. While other children were watching Saturday morning cartoons, Winona was being raised by the vanguards of consciousness expansion. This is the critical variable that most biographies overlook. She was conditioned from birth to reject the superficial. She was taught that reality is malleable, that the inner world is more significant than the material one. In his sociological study, The Making of a Counterculture, Theodore Roszak describes this environment as one that prioritizes personalist values over technocratic efficiency. Winona was programmed with this software. She was built to be porous, to absorb the emotional frequencies of the room, and to value raw authenticity above all else. This radical sensitivity was her superpower in the artistic commune of her childhood. But when you take a child raised to feel everything and drop her into an industry designed to feel nothing, you are not creating a star. You are engineering a collision. The laboratory had created a perfect emotional sensor. Now, the machine was about to switch it on.
By the late 1980s, the tectonic plates of American culture were shifting. The era of sun-bleached plastic commercialism was decaying, and a new, darker cynicism, what we now call Gen X angst, was rising from the cracks. Hollywood needed a new avatar to sell this mood. They didn't need another blonde bombshell. They needed a ghost. They needed Winona. The industry didn't just cast her, they weaponized her fragility. Look at the filmography. In Beetlejuice, she is the strange and unusual goth. In Heathers, she is the cynical outsider. In Reality Bites, she is the aimless, anxious voice of a lost generation. She wasn't just playing characters, she was performing a public service for a depressed demographic. She became the patron saint of outsiders. But here lies the dangerous economic paradox. For Winona, her sensitivity was a burden, a heavy, confusing weight she carried from the laboratory. But for the studios, that same sensitivity was a gold mine. The more fragile she appeared, the more authentic the product felt, and the higher the box office returns climbed. She was effectively rewarded for her pain. This created a feedback loop of devastation. To maintain her status as the it girl, she had to remain the sad girl. The machinery of fame encased her in a persona of eternal, porcelain vulnerability. She was treated less like a human being and more like a rare, fragile artifact to be displayed, but never touched. As noted by film historian Karina Longworth, the star system essentially strip mines the actor's personality until the line between the person and the persona dissolves. Winona was trapped in a hall of mirrors. The world loved her for her darkness, so she had no incentive to find the light. She was the most successful actress of her generation, yet she was spiritually starving in plain sight. The system was running perfectly. but the human engine at the center was beginning to overheat.
On December 12, 2001, the machinery finally broke. The setting was the fluorescent-lit purgatory of Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. The event has been memorialized in pop culture as a heist, but a forensic analysis of the security logs reveals something far more disturbing. It was not a robbery, it was a glitch. Let's look at the data. Winona Ryder was apprehended with $5,500 worth of merchandise in her possession. To the average citizen, this is a felony. To a Hollywood star earning millions per film, this is pocket change. The mathematics of the theft simply do not add up. There was no fiscal necessity, no logical incentive. The inventory of stolen items further unravels the criminal mastermind narrative. She didn't target high-value jewelry or resellable assets. She took a Marc Jacobs sweater, some hair accessories, and a pair of mesh socks. These are not the spoils of a calculated theft. They are the random, chaotic graspings of someone trying to hold on to physical reality. The security footage confirms this anomaly. A thief moves with precision, speed, and hyper-awareness. Winona wandered. She drifted through the aisles in a haze. When police searched her, they found the chemical explanation for this drift: a heavy cocktail of prescription painkillers, including oxycodone. She wasn't looking for a thrill. She was heavily medicated, injured from a previous film shoot, and operating in a state of clinical dissociation. In psychology, this is often interpreted as a cry for help, manifested through self-sabotage. It is the subconscious mind pulling the emergency brake because the conscious mind refuses to stop. The Saks incident was not an act of rebellion. It was the moment the porcelain idol shattered under its own weight. She had effectively short-circuited in public. But instead of an ambulance, the culture called for a prosecutor. The glitch had occurred. Now, the spectacle would begin.
If the shoplifting was the glitch, the trial was the reboot the media desperately needed. We must contextualize the timeline. The trial of Winona Ryder took place in the immediate shadow of September 11th. The American psyche was fractured, terrified, and exhausted by the reality of global terror. The news cycle was a relentless stream of war and tragedy. The public didn't just want a distraction, they required one to function. Winona Ryder became the designated sacrificial lamb for a traumatized nation. The disproportionate scale of the prosecution reveals the absurdity. A team of 8 prosecutors was assigned to a misdemeanor shoplifting case, resources typically reserved for violent felonies or organized crime. It was a judicial theater designed for the cameras. The courtroom was transformed into a runway. Every day, the press analyzed her outfit choices, the vintage frocks, the demure headbands, with more scrutiny than the legal arguments. Then came the ultimate twist of late capitalist irony, the Free Winona t-shirt. While she faced the possibility of real prison time, the culture turned her crisis into a fashion trend. A hipster boutique in Los Angeles printed her mugshot on cotton, and suddenly wearing her downfall became a badge of counterculture cool. The very industry that was prosecuting her was simultaneously selling the merchandise of her persecution. This was the final proof that Winona Ryder was no longer viewed as a human being. She had been fully converted into a meme, a logo, a unit of entertainment. The system proved it could monetize her destruction just as effectively as it had monetized her success. The world was watching the external circus, but to understand the true casualty count, we need to stop looking at the flashing lights and start looking at the wiring of the human mind.
While the tabloids were diagnosing Winona with kleptomania or narcissism, a far more accurate diagnosis was being ignored, one that existed in the pages of clinical psychology, not gossip columns. To understand Winona's mind, we must turn to the work of psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron. In 1996, Aron published a groundbreaking framework called the Highly Sensitive Person, HSP. She identified a distinct personality trait, sensory processing sensitivity, found in roughly 20% of the population. These individuals do not just feel more, their nervous systems are biologically wired to process stimuli more deeply. They have no filter.
The world comes at them with the volume turned all the way up. Winona Ryder is the textbook case study of an HSP operating in a high-voltage environment. When she described herself in interviews as having no skin, she wasn't speaking metaphorically. She was describing a neurological reality. The bright lights, the intrusive questions, the constant surveillance. For an HSP, these aren't just annoyances, they are physical assaults. Her melancholy wasn't an act, it was the inevitable exhaustion of a system constantly redlining to process the input of the world. But society has a long history of punishing women who feel deeply. In our cultural analysis, Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today, author Rachel Verona Coate explores how history systematically categorized emotional women as hysterical or mad. The media labeled Winona crazy because she refused to be numb. She violated the unwritten rule of celebrity. You can perform emotion, but you cannot actually be affected by it. Winona was trying to navigate a cynical world with a Victorian nervous system. She was chemically incapable of the detachment that fame required. And nowhere is this struggle more visible than in the project she fought for 7 years to create, a project that was supposed to be her salvation, but ended up being a premonition.
If you want to see the blueprint of Winona Ryder's collapse, you don't look at the security footage. You look at the movie she fought for a decade to make, Girl Interrupted. In the mid-90s, Winona discovered the memoir of Susanna Kazin, a woman institutionalized in the 1960s for a borderline personality. Winona didn't just read the book, she recognized herself in the text. She bought the rights with her own money. She shopped it to every studio in town. She was desperate to tell this story, believing that if she could externalize this narrative, if she could put the madness on screen, she could finally exorcise it from her own life. It was intended to be an artistic catharsis. Instead, it became a curse. The production of Girl Interrupted dissolved the boundary between actor and role. Winona was playing a character who feels reality too intensely, while simultaneously living as a woman who feels reality too intensely. She was pulling from her own reservoirs of depression and anxiety to fuel the performance. She was reopening her own wounds for the camera, day after day, take after take. The irony is tragic. In the film, her character Susanna is famously told, "You're not crazy, you're just a lazy, self-indulgent little girl driving yourself nuts." This is the exact rhetoric the media would use against Winona herself just 2 years later. She produced the film to explain herself to the world, to say, look, this is what it feels like. But the world didn't listen to the plea, they just consumed the product. The film won Angelina Jolie an Oscar and solidified Winona's status as a serious producer, but the psychological toll was catastrophic. She had stared into the abyss to make art, and when the filming stopped, the abyss didn't blink. The remote movie wrapped in 1999. The shoplifting incident happened in 2001. The timeline is not a coincidence. Girl Interrupted wasn't just a movie, it was a premonition. She had rehearsed her own breakdown. Now she was ready to perform it for real.
After the gavel fell and the cameras turned away, Winona Ryder did something that terrified Hollywood more than any scandal. She went silent. For nearly a decade, she vanished from the A-list. The industry narrative was that she had been blacklisted, shunned by the studios for her crime and her uninsurable reputation. But if we flip the lens, we see a different story. The exile wasn't a punishment, it was a quarantine. Winona retreated to San Francisco, far from the paparazzi flashbulbs of Los Angeles. She stopped chasing the algorithm of fame. She stopped trying to be the avatar for a generation. For the first time since she was a teenager, she just lived. This great silence is the only reason she is still with us today. Consider the survival rate of her peers. The icons of her specific frequency, the sensitive, the grunge, the authentic, did not fare well. River Phoenix, her contemporary and soulmate in spirit, collapsed and died on a sidewalk in 1993. Kurt Cobain, a voice of her angst, was gone by 1994. The Gen X archetype was not built for longevity, it was built for combustion. Winona was on that exact same trajectory. She was burning the candle at both ends, fueled by prescription pills and the pressure to be the sad girl for the world. The shoplifting scandal, as brutal and humiliating as it was, forced her to stop. It severed the cord. It ejected her from the machine before the machine could finish the job. The ruined career was a myth. What actually happened was an involuntary life-saving intervention. She traded her relevance for her sanity. She sat out the 2000s, a decade of reality TV and glossy superficiality that would have eaten her alive, and waited in the shadows. She wasn't hiding. She was healing. She was waiting for the culture to shift again. She was waiting for a world that was ready to feel.
It took 2 decades for the wheel of history to turn. But when it did, it stopped exactly where Winona Ryder had been standing all along. Her resurrection in Stranger Things was not a coincidence of casting. It was a poetic alignment of actor and era. In the role of Joyce Byers, she played a woman dismissed by society as hysterical and unstable, yet who turns out to be the only person capable of seeing the terrifying truth. The world finally loved her again, not despite her anxiety, but because of it. This brings us to the final synthesis. The tragedy of Winona Ryder was never about theft or drugs or celebrity. It was a tragedy of timing. She was a modern woman, trapped in a cynical age. She spoke the language of trauma and sensitivity before society had the vocabulary to understand it. In the 90s, her emotions were treated as a weakness to be exploited. Today, in an era that champions mental health and vulnerability, those same emotions are recognized as a strength. She didn't change, we did. The industry that tried to break her has now been remade in her image. The sad girl is no longer a punchline. She is the hero. Winona Ryder walked through the fire of public humiliation and survived the silence of exile to teach us one final, enduring lesson. Being broken is not a failure. It is often the only way to let the light in. The world has finally caught up to the girl who felt too much. And this time, we are listening.